Hello everyone, and welcome back to Chess Club. My name is Killydis, and I'm here to share Chess Club's Serene Fire Exia deck. This deck has been a great team effort and a blast to put together. A little story time. It all started out in our brainstorming period, where we wanted to make sure we visit every archetype in A and B at least once, and I took an initial stab at building a Fire Exia deck. The original list was very heavy Exia, and in our initial testings, the deck has shown a lot of potential, especially with the Exia element, calling it a Symbol Voltron Kill, which we wanted to further develop the concept. We did observe that regular Fire Spirit could be a little fragile to aggression, and so Pickle Sword shared the thought of focusing on healing, and that's kind of how we came to this deck today. Why did I take this over Win Vanitas to Toronto? Honestly, I really thought there would be a larger showing of Win Unique Allies and Slimes, and I've always been a non-meta player. We did some testing against Jin and Vanitas, and Vanitas did win the majority of those games, but there were a couple of times Jin surprisingly did win convincingly. It showed potential, so I locked in a week before Toronto, and then took the rest of the week to refine the list. Unfortunately, we bubbled out of top 8, but nonetheless, I'm pretty happy about the deck's overall performance, and I think the deck will have a place in the meta post-Toronto. So let's get started. We'll first go over the material deck, main deck, and then sideboard. We'll break down the main deck into openers, engine, cores, and utility tech. Then we'll talk about the sideboard and share some closing thoughts of Toronto. Here's the material deck. Starting off, we run Spirit of Serene Fire. This card is important because it significantly impacts our ratios for the deck and adds a lot of consistency, allowing you to sculpt your openers and engine pieces. The on-demand recover 6 is also on theme to the core of the deck, and it's really important. We play Jin, Defiant. He's our Exia champion lineage. Unfortunately, we do not take advantage of his level 1 effect much. We play Jin Zealous Maverick. He's also underutilized in this type of deck. There's one small edge case where we can make our Savage Swings hit for 3 and a key damage threshold for allies. We play Jin, then Dying Resolve. It's the main reason we're playing this deck. Immortality is no joke. This effect is very powerful on the champion, and the window to interact is very small, making it quite difficult to beat Jin. The next set of Regalia is pretty important to materialize as soon as possible to start accruing influence, since we'll be turboing to level 3. We're playing Berserker Plate. This is 90% of the time the next materialization after level 3, and the sooner you get this online, the more cards you'll draw. We play Backup Charger. It's another card that helps us in our influence recovery, and we play Chalice of Blood. This comes online a lot sooner than expected, and it's another card that helps our influence gain even more. If you notice, there's a theme of influence gap gaining. Shang-Chi and Quicksilver Grail has been often paired together. Quicksilver Grail helps in 2 ways. It really helps with controlled banishment, and helps with materialization pace and activating Shang-Chi at the end of your opponent's turn. Shang-Chi is usually the signal that you're going for a kill turn. In my opinion, materializing Shang-Chi in your materialization phase is a little risky unless you are for certain, because taking 5 damage or even more will mean there's no going back and it's game time. Getting to see 3 cards, 1 for Shang-Chi, 1 for plate, and 1 for your draw, it's a lot of cards to see that can determine if you go for it or not. So it's a main reason why I like to put Shang-Chi under Quicksilver Grail and activate it at the end of your opponent's turn. Smoke Bomb is played to get around Taunters and Interceptors. Sword of Seeking is important for 2 reasons. It helps deal with stealth shenanigans and gives you a second weapon to swing with Enrages. If you suspect your opponent is holding up interaction for Shang-Chi and you don't have an attack card or have to do other things, playing an attack card costs too much influence to do. And the last piece of our material deck is Safeguard Amulet. We run this to help keep ourselves alive. At the end of our turn, for those decks that can deal with fast damage like Merlin and their fireballs or slimes with Stone Scale plus Storm Slime. That's it for our material deck. Now we'll move on to the main deck. Starting with openers. We have 4 Creative Shocks, 4 Fast Cures, and 4 Fractal Insights. Creative Shock is a staple fire card. It's great for filtering and sculpting your hand. It can also go +1 if you pitch a float, and we run enough float to make that happen. Fast Cure is also a good neutral opener. It's on theme for lots of recovery, good into aggressive decks, and we also run Fractal Insight. It's another neutral opener. What's good about Fractal Insight is that it glimpses to, helping you find the cards you need to see and adding consistency. This card also pairs nicely with an engine card we play, which segues nicely into the next set of cards. For our engine, we play 4 Gloam Spires of Black Market. We run 4 Gentle Respites and 4 Dungeon Guides. Gloam Spire is a very powerful influence engine card for this deck, where we often do banish from memory to help with managing the upkeep cost. This card is pretty key to the deck. It often will, on average, gives us +3 influence over the course of the game, even more sometimes. Also, it's not so bad to give your opponent some influence, but do wary if your opponent plays into Gloam Spire. If your opponent is doing that, cut them off. They are now in a bad situation where they have at least 7 influence to work with, while you're steadily increasing yours with plate. You'll know when it's time to give up on Gloam Spire when you're at 7 influence before plate and can't see a world where you play 3 cards in a turn. Gentle Respite is one of the deck's +1. Often you'll be at lower influence than your opponent, and it's a float for Creative Shock as well. And Dungeon Guide. It's really important to get to Exia as soon as possible for Immortality and unlocking the Exia element, but the real benefit is that you get to start materializing your Regalia 1 turn sooner, which is a huge tempo boost. Now to the core of the deck. Cores of the deck, we have a main core and a subcore. Let's talk about the subcore first. We run 4 Men Fleshes and 3 Potions of Healing. In combination with Fast Cure and our Serene Spirit, we are at a base of 28 + 6, 34 health champion. With Berserker Plate, we're now at 41, and on average we see 2 pieces of healing. Now we're talking about 50+ health. That's a lot of health to deal with. That health buys us a lot of time for our engines like Gloam Spire and Berserker Plate to accrue lots of value so we can bury our opponents in card advantage. Men Flesh is pretty amazing. It helps us get out of lethal range for free and can help you test the waters with your opponent or bait going lethal. Potion of Healing is also a great discovery. We wanted another way of healing at fast speed so that it made lethal attempts at the end of our turn really hard to do. Your opponent would have to play around the Lineage Release, Potion of Healing, and maybe even a Fast Cure for 15 points of fast healing. We only run 3 because it's not particularly great in your opener, but it's something you definitely would want to see won later in the game. That's also the general philosophy for me when deciding to play a 4 of or a 3 of in a deck. Rarely do I run 2 of something, and that is usually reserved for a really nice to have, maybe a high roll moment, or something you want to see super late in the game. Next, we'll talk about the main core and how we win the game, aka Assemble, Voltron, Kill. Here we have 4 Relentless Outbursts, 4 Enrages, 3 Proof of Life, 3 Blood Bond Blade Sworns, 3 Hemorrhaging Rends, and 3 Blazing Lunges. The easier kill line to see for an OTK will usually look like either 2 Relentless Outbursts, some strong G-Swings, or setting up a double Enrage plus attack card. Aside from that, the core synergizes well together, and there are several combinations over the course of a couple of turns, or even on 1 turn you can use to beat your opponent. Sequencing and playing around your opponent's defenses is key. One thing to really remember is to count your influence, You only get one shot to pull off the big turn, so make sure you have enough. Now going from the top, we have Relentless Outburst. This card is very powerful and is probably the first draw to Exia for most players. This is a cleave without having to be one, and really shines when you're at 36 damage, even though the bonus starts at 35. This is probably your best route against allies and against decks that can't deal with many small hits. Enrage. This card is efficient for its damage potential and plays multiple starts opening up one-shot lines. Paired with Blazing Lunge, you really only have to consider one thing that stops this big swing, and that's cards like Song of Frost. You can play around stealth, either with Sword of Seeking or a Cleave. Proof of Life. This card in combination of Shuangji or taking a really big hit is important to consider when you want to attempt lethal on your next turn, or when your opponent is super cautious and dealing lots of damage to you. Activating 2 Proofs of Life will double the damage twice. So for instance, with Shuangji on enter, taking 5 double is 10 and double 10 is 20. For Bloodbond Bladesworn, this card is not great in every matchup, but it's necessary to have. This is also another avenue to try to get more damage done to you, as Bloodbond can apply lots of pressure, and they have to deal with it. Paired with Relentless at 35 damage, Taken is neat because it can push your damage up to 40 and keep your Bloodbond around and getting you to the Proof of Life threshold ability. Hemorrhaging Wren. This card helps you to clean up large boards because we're not really interacting with the board in the first few turns. This is also a way to get around stealth as a good answer to Tristan clones in combination of Enragers or Shuangji. This could be really a flex spot and is meta dependent. Blazing Lunge. This card has overperformed and has been MVP throughout Toronto for me, being able to pierce through Veiling Breeze defenses and spell shields all weekend. This is more efficient in my opinion than setting up a Varric, which would require you to have Mega Influence or rely on 2 weapons as well. Now on to the last parts of the main deck, which are the utility and tuck slots. We run 3 Underfires, 3 Meltdowns, and 3 Savage Swings. Underfire. This was really a meta call. Honestly, the damage potential for unique when allies is extremely high. We play Underfire over Residue Stand because it helps shore up the deck's other weaknesses to Nico, and it's possibly useful in the mirror. Also, the math for Underfire versus Residue Stand is like this. Say for example, your opponent has a Dilu, a Lube, and a Parsonet, and then proceeds to Oath. Even through a Resolute, you're going to still take 6 damage. So why not just take 4? Was really the thought process behind using Underfire. Meltdown. This was another meta call and a personal preference in being flexible for Toronto. As a control OTK deck, we needed a way to answer problematic cards that stop us from winning the game or just makes our lives a lot easier. This helps out against Quicksilver Grails with Covenant, Safeguard Amies, Lanterns, and is decent in the mirror and can be useful against Nico, hitting a Vapor Shield Jet or their weapons. And Savage Swing. During our Slimes playtesting, I wanted a way to kind of deal with an early Slime to really stop them from getting free +1s for their level 2, but also wouldn't feel terrible if a Slime Shield or Escape the Wreckage was played. And also this helps our float count for Trade of Shock and act as a cheap Enrage enabler later into the game if our weapons were dealt with. That concludes the main deck. Now, talk about the sideboard. This sideboard, which was specifically tailored for Toronto. We run 1 Viridian Protective Trinket, 3 Crimson Prescience, 3 Planches, 2 Heavenly Guides, and 4 Mystic Purifiers. For Viridian Protective Trinket, we need to give ourselves a fighting chance for Nico and water decks, so this is why we include it here. If we were suspecting a lot more water and Nico running around, this would have been the main deck instead of sideboard. Crimson Prescience. This card has been an awesome spell shield and is super flexible. This helps us the most against fast speed damage spells like your fireballs, but can also be named for champions so that you won't take damage from them. Also, this can be used as a great trick to get two things out of your opponent. During Recollection, you can play this card. If your opponent wants to respawn, they will have to deal the damage upfront to you, potentially expending their resources and leaving them defenseless, and helping your kill potential, or they give you another turn for gaining more influence. Blanche is really good. This is here for the level 3 decks that can deal damage at the end of your turn again. This is also really good for Razor Gales, negating a lot of that chip damage from them, and it's good in the mirror for opposing Relentless Outbursts. We run a couple of Heavenly Guides. This is to help with our level 3 matchup. You'll know to bring this in if your opponent is highly dependent on their level 3 effect, or to start getting advantage once they hit 3. And for Mystic Purifiers, we knew going into Toronto that we'll face a lot of Killydis, or face Killydis in general. This is a great card against their Razor Gales, forcing them to either go several turns without chip, or to make them spend their turns setting up Razor Gale again, without using that turn to gain influence through Baby Grays and Reclaims and Windmill Engineers. Keeping your opponent to one Razor Gale is good enough to not feel threatened by the deck, and allows you to get to your end game. That wraps up the sideboard. I did want to share my experience at Toronto playing the deck. Playing those 12 rounds, I faced 8 Razor Gale decks of either the Kongming or Killydis variety, played 2 unique Wind allies, 1 Wind Diana allies, and 1 Wind Arisana. To note, I had pretty good success in the Razor Gale decks, going 5-2-1 against them. I didn't get to experience this in our testing, but when playing through the event, there was one thing very noticeable about the deck. It's very hard to finish 3 games of Grand Archive. What ends up happening is, I will surprise my opponent and win game 1. Then game 2, I'll bring in my sideboard, which includes a lot of defensive measures on top of the bulk we have, and just not really lose game 2. Especially against the Killydis decks, where in game 1, it does take a while due to the nature of their deck and its number of actions and glimpsing. The Killydis deck can take some time naturally resolving their effects, plus having to deal with the massive life pool Jin has can take a lot of time of the game. And suddenly, we win game 1 with double Enrage Blazing Lunge, getting through their defenses. Then game 2, I have so much sideboard hate for that deck that it makes it extremely difficult for them to deal with, in combination of Mystic Purifiers, Crimson Prescience, and Blanches. The reason I think we don't get to play 3 games of Grand Archive is because Jin feels complicated to play against. Your opponent is doing extra thinking that they didn't have to do before, and has to weigh the pros and cons of trying to deal lots of damage to the Jin player on their turn. They're trying to calculate your kill potential, but may also not be familiar with it and adds more time to their thinking process. As a Jin player, your first few turns are pretty easy. You play efficiently and get to level 3 ASAP. Post 3, you just have to understand if your opponent can put you to lethal through your healing, and then figure out if you have kill potential, which admittedly does take a couple of minutes even if you already have those tables in your mind. But for the most part, in the mid part of the game, your main goal is to gain lots of influence so that you can set up for those kill turns later on. Overall, the deck is very strong. It gives this sort of menacing vibe to it, but it's fun to play. I have to give props to Weeds of the Shore for making this champion truly feel like it's all about risk and sacrifice. The deck does have a certain play style, so it may not be for everyone, but if it is your cup of tea, then I hope you enjoy this deck. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.